Skeptic Radio's Raiders of the Unknown. On today's episode, we have a special guest. I'm going to let you introduce yourself. As we've been doing a series on Instagram influencers, people who are sharing a unique perspective, we would like to learn more about your background and the kind of activism you're doing online.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on the show. It's a real honor. My name is Mansur. I'm an Israeli. I was a former officer in the IDF in the Special Forces and a hostage negotiation expert for a while. I am a Druze, which is a very small uh, secret religion, you can call, that is living in the Middle East, mostly in the area of Syria, Lebanon, and Israel, and is now heavily persecuted in the areas of Syria mostly, but some in Lebanon as well and in Jordan. The only place that they're safe is in Israel. And yeah, been a big fan of the US. Love your country. I think it's one of the most important countries in the world. And since October 7, I started doing advocacy, mostly to stand with my country, Israel, but also to help educate people in regarding to countering anti-Semitism and standing on our Judeo-Christian values that I feel that are under a big threat right now.
Okay, so as I was watching your different uh, TikToks or Instagram posts, you mentioned being an Arab and you mentioned being a Christian. How is that for you growing up in Israel among the Druze community? Did you feel discriminated by the Israelis, mistreated by your fellow Arabs? Did you feel as not being fully integrated, or was it different than what most people would assume?
No, it's probably different than what most people would assume. In Israel, in general, you have complete freedom to practice your religion. So it doesn't matter which religion you are, if you're an Israeli citizen, especially. With that, there is some groups that are, let's say, more traditional or religious. So you can be in a very traditional Jewish family or a Druze family or Muslim family, and they might be very upset that you chose a different path. But I think you can have the same thing if you're also a Christian and you go with another denomination or another faith. For me, it just made complete sense because as a child, I was fascinated with religion, and I've tried to study the Druze religion, and I tried to study the Islam and Judaism and Christianity. And as the time went by, I started realizing that Judaism and Christianity, they complete one another theologically. It's also a religion that is very much focused on religion rather than on military campaigns or political kind of movement. It was more about theology, how to build a temple, how to pray, how to live your life between you and God. And Islam felt to me more like it was more of a military campaign. And other religions just didn't really resonate with me that much. So for me, it was very clear that I find myself much more related to that. So I started studying that a lot. And when I finished my military service, I even took the Bible, here, this Bible, and I went and I walked all the land of Israel, with the Bible, where I put some verses and I started reading it where it happened just to help me better understand it. My family, the Druze, are very, very tolerant people to other religions. They kind of basically, it's a new age, 1,000 years old religion. They believe that all religions are correct, and they all kind of point to the same God, only teaching in a different way. So it was not a big shocker for them, or a big problem. Actually, most Druze that you'll meet will tell you, yeah, we believe in Jesus. He's the Messiah. He's a great guy. They might not see it the same way like Christians, but in general, they respect and tolerate every religion. So to your question, there wasn't any hostility, but there was some kind of fear in me that I'll be disappointing my parents. That they really wanted me to go in their way, and now here I am, found my own kind of path. But then when I came and I shared that with them at the age of 21, to my surprise, they both told me like, we've knew it all along. We've been seeing it. We saw that it's doing good to you. So we're very happy for you. And we just, pray that, you'll find the right path in life. That's kind of.
So one thing that we try to dispel in this show is propaganda, and I know you mentioned that one of your goals is to combat anti-Semitism. Most anti-Semitism, especially in the media, is built on propaganda that it was already established years back, or 2,000-year-old propaganda, or 3,000-year-old propaganda, dismissing any Jewish claim to anything, or inability to see the Jewish people as either equal, capable of creating any positive, efforts for the world, or maligning that everything Jewish is malicious and destructive. So when when you look at the Bible, when you look at the revelation of God that you feel connected with, do you see it as a way to cut through all the propaganda and all the political stuff, or do you see it as supporting some of the political movements that are already established? Because that's what we're struggling with here in the U.S., where the Christian nationalists, the Zionists, have either co-opted religion to prove their points, or they have used religion to push their agenda. As a religious guy, I think it should be the other way around. We should be the conscience of the world, and we should be showing them the proper way to treat others and the proper way to discern things from a spiritual perspective.
Hmm. I think I understand your point, especially when it comes to America. It was one of the places that I've seen that have the highest level of political identity, that have very much even embedded itself with a lot of elements of faith. And I was quite surprised, to see how strong it is in America compared to, let's say, other places that I've seen. And I completely agree with you that we should be very, very careful. One time I had a pastor in Israel that said something very, very nice. He was preaching by the Sea of Galilee, and I was listening to a sermon, and he came in and said, "The church is like a ship. And there's nothing more beautiful than seeing a magnificent ship sailing in the ocean with its sails up open, going to look for new lands and horizons. And it's very sad when you see a ship just laying on the sand, like a broken ship." But he said, but we need to make sure that the ship is designed to be in the ocean, like the church is designed to be in the world, but the world should not be in the church, just like the ocean should not be in the ship. And I feel like this is something that we need to be very careful as Christians, that we don't mix politics and worldviews and all kind of movements inside of our theology, rather than look at it. I was very humbled when I was in Africa helping a friend. We were building a school in Uganda, and one of the preachers there came and told me, "Listen, most people here can barely read and write. But the most important thing, most beautiful thing is that the message of salvation is the most simple message in the world. You don't need to be a great theologist, you don't need to be a great scholar to understand the message of salvation." So I think that's a lot of time where we as Christians, we complicate things and we start getting too much politics into our faith. I do think that there is elements, obviously, of values that will stand. You can have a nation that is more Christian oriented in its values and its behavior. You can have nations that are completely far away from that. But I think it's very sad when we see people using faith as a political tool. But then also, it's not surprising, because when you look at it through the history of all mankind, that's what they always did it, because religion is a great tool to control people and to shift people's opinions. So often it's been used by wrong players.
Well, let's go right into it. So, I have a master's of Jewish studies, and when people say ridiculous things such as Jesus was a Zionist or Jesus was a Palestinian, I would say, well, if you think Zionism is the Jewish idea that the Jewish people have a homeland, he was a Zionist. But if you mean he was a ultra Zionist political, um, you know, agent that supports all the actions of the secular state of Israel, that is anachronistic and ridiculous. If you say that he was a Palestinian because he was born in the Roman um, segment of what they call Palestine, which they didn't even call them that until like 100 years later,
Hmm.
I guess. But he wasn't part of the 1930s Palestinian movement of political emancipation, or the 1960s Russian-led, uh, you know, counter-Israeli initiative by Arafat. So
Exactly.
so people are making stuff up and trying to stick Jesus into it. How would you describe Jesus in his views of the Holy Land?
I think you nailed it. The way you described it. Jesus was a Jew. He was born a Jew. He died as a Jew. All of his disciples, his 12 disciples were Jewish. The first church, as a matter of fact, was a Jewish church. They didn't know the term Christianity didn't exist back then. It was the kehillah, the congregation. There was house groups, and they were going and praying, and they saw themselves as a continuous evolution of the Jewish faith. And later on, it got spread and it got spread to the nations of the world. And then, the term Christianity came quite later on, with the oily one. The Greeks, they were thinking like, there's this guy that was anointed with oil. So they called him Christos, the oily one. So that's where the word even Christus, Christ came from. His name was Yeshua Mashiach. So to come and say that Jesus was a Zionist in the aspect of, and by the way, that's how most Israelis look at the term Zionism. That term became like a different word and a different meaning used outside of Israel. If you ask an Israeli if you're a Zionist, he will tell you, yeah, of course, I believe that the Jews have a right to live in Israel. And Zion is Zion. Zion is like Har Zion, Mitorat Zion. It's just that area. So he will tell you, yeah, I'm a Zionist, like I'm a Jew or like I'm an Israeli. They don't, in Israel, they don't uh, put a sticker on it as a political movement, the term Zionist. But then outside of Israel, I've noticed it have become a much more political statement where people are trying to drag figures of faith. Are you a Zionist? Yes or no? Jesus was a Zionist. Well, I don't think that Jesus would have probably agreed with most politicians. Hmm. I'm talking right now here, so I don't know. Well, I'll continue talking. I don't think that Jesus will agree with most politicians. Here we go. We lost you for a second.
Sorry, go ahead.
No problem. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so I was saying, I don't think that Jesus would have agreed with most politicians living on the face of this planet right now. I think Jesus would have done back then, today, what he would have done back then. He would have walked into the temple, he would have flipped some tables, and he would maybe revoked a few people and put them in the right path and not say, yeah, I'm Team Bibi, I'm Team Trump, I'm Team Macron. I think that's you trying to take faith again and put it in a political place. I do think that Jesus, when it comes to that conflict of does Israel have a place to be, or do the Jews have a place, he will say absolutely yes. This is their land, and this is the people of God. But I don't think he's gonna say I am Likud or I am Ma'arach or I am Republican or I am Democrat. And I think that's where people try to like drag it too much into that. But when it comes to, let's say, the term Zionism today, people are looking at that term today as if it's a separate identity from being an Israeli, which is not true. Most Israelis that you'll meet, and I'm a non-Jewish Israeli, I'm a Zionist, meaning I believe that Israel have the right to exist, and I believe that Israel is Zion. That's it. That would be like telling you I'm a Tel Avivi or I'm an Israeli. Zion is Israel, so that's what it means to us. But outside, they will try to stick it as, yeah, Zionism are the people that believe in the oppressing of the Palestinians, but it's not all the Jews. And they make up like fairy tales that are not really related to what does it mean Israelis. Most Israelis don't want to oppress the Palestinians. More by far. They just want to live in peace, but they just know that the Palestinians are not what people think. That there's about 85% there that still celebrate October 7, and that most of them do want to see all the Jews being massacred and the only Jewish state disappears from the face of the earth. So for most Israelis, the term Zionism have nothing to do with that. It's literally, we are Israelis and Jesus was a Jew, and that's kind of about it. That's what most Israelis would kind of go into that depth when it comes to that question.
Okay, but before we start accusing people of stuff, so here they accuse Israelis of all of them wanting to kill the Palestinians because if they didn't want to kill the Palestinians, they wouldn't have picked Bibi as their leader or Smotrich
That
or
is
all
a
those
big mis
guys.
That's funny how far people can be because in Israel, Bibi was considered the least combatant prime minister that we had in a very long time. And that's what I mean. People try to take a mirror of copying their sets of politics and putting it on Israel. For example, I would say that Israel's right wing is much more close to America's left wing in the characteristics of how they admire a leader and some of their political identity, while Israel's left wing are actually more combatant than the right wings. Like most of the fighter pilots that you see in the special forces in Israel are actually left wing, but they're also the ones that tend to actually want to have maybe a two-state solution until October 7. And now they kind of had an eye opening. Okay, you can't really have a two-state solution there. So when it comes to blaming that Bibi want to kill Palestinians, that is easily, I would say, one of the most ridiculous things that you can say, because if Israel wanted to kill Palestinians, we would have killed them all in 1 week. If Israel wanted to kill, there's not a single army in the Middle East that can stop Israel. There's not a that even will pose a threat to Israel. Israel was in Lebanon for 20 years. Israel did not put a single settlement in Lebanon. They just went to fight Hezbollah. Israel left Gaza and gave them everything that the Jews had. I was there as an officer when we took the Israelis out of Gaza, and we left them villas and greenhouses and everything, and they took it all and make it a terror infrastructure. And then they came on October 7th, jumped over the fence, murdered, raped, violated, and kidnapped babies from Israel. So Israel went to bring them, and they ended up using their own people as human shields. If they would have gave up the hostages that they kidnapped in day one of the war, Gaza would have not been right now flattened. And when it comes to that terminology, I'll give you a very good example, because I was an officer in the army, and I've seen war, and I know how complicated it is. Look at the war in Iran right now. Now, I'm not disrespecting the American army. I think it's one of the best armies in the world, but I think that they're still, in terms of quantity and quality, they're not as trained as the Israeli army, because we just have much more, you know, missions that we're always engaged with and wars. So our soldiers are much trained, and the knowledge moves much faster between officer to soldier because it's just much more fresh. We're literally in the front line. So America goes to war right now in Iran, and who ends up shooting a school? America. Was it Israel? No. America ended up shooting a missile at a school, killing children. Now, did America do that on purpose? Absolutely not. I think that would be the most ridiculous thing to come and claim, because if they want it, they'll do it more. And if they want it, why would you even attack Iran? Because Iran is already killing their own children. So you don't need to go and just shoot a missile to kill more children. So these claims have no logic. So to come and say the same thing about Israel, yeah, Israel, Bibi want to go and kill Palestinians. No, Bibi was actually one of the complaints that we have about Bibi, most Israelis like myself and others, that Bibi, in hope to keep quiet and peace, was actually paying Hamas, was allowing Qatar and other groups to give money to Hamas with an agreement that if you give you millions of dollars, you won't shoot a missile. So he was trying to bribe Hamas for a very long time, and this is public knowledge, to keep quietness. And even Shabak people, when they were asked, what are you doing? They said, listen, I would rather pay Hamas $100 million a year and not a single Israeli being killed. So that was like the understanding back then. They underestimated Hamas, but they were giving them money just to keep them quiet, to not shoot at us. If we wanted to kill them, there would not be a single Palestinian alive, and literally in less than a week. They are way, way less capable than Iran, than Hezbollah, and then all the other, armies that Israel faced. They're just a bunch of guys on tractors and, with bicycles and a few gliders.
Well,
So
let me
that's why I
let me
think
ask
it's,
you.
yeah.
So as a Christian, how do you feel when you hear that journalists, schools, hospitals, and many civilians die unnecessarily? Do you think that they're just gaffes from the Israelis, that even though they had intelligence from uh, the the U.S., the British, the Germans, the French, that they would still make huge mistakes and have so much collateral damage? Like, how does that, as both a soldier and a Christian, do you think that there's not enough carefulness, or is it just random bombings that happen because
You're talking about the
area?
war in Gaza, or which operation we're talking about?
Yes, yes, Gaza.
So First of all, as a human and as a Christian, I think it's tragic and sad when any innocent civilian dies, especially if it's women and children, but in general, anyone. And I wish no civilian casualties will happen to in wars. But then again, with that said and done, I was in war and I was an officer, and I know that it's very, very hard to prevent civilian casualties, especially when you're fighting against terrorism that is mostly predominantly Muslim around the world. And in these Islamic terrorist groups, they often use their own population as human shields. Often, we've seen it with Hezbollah, we've seen it with Iran, we've seen it right now with Gaza. So it makes it very, very hard to avoid it. Now, as an officer, I remember myself when I used to take missions into Gaza, I would have sometimes 3 hours to give briefing to my soldier. And 3 hours to give you a comparison, when I was sitting with some, my colleagues from the special forces from the US or from Europe, they would tell me, "You guys crazy? For a mission like that, we'll train for 3 months." And I said, "Yeah, sometimes we have 3-4 hours to train for the same mission that you train for months." So we'll go on a mission, and out of these 3-4 hours, I will immediately go to the barracks. I'll wake up my sergeant, tell him, "Listen, get the guys ready. I'm going to talk to the intel officer." Then I'll get a briefing for 1 hour. I come back from the Shabak, and then I'll tell them, "Okay, listen, guys, open a map. Over here, there's a school. If we get shot at from that direction, we don't shoot back because we might actually hit the school. Over here, there's a nursery. We try to avoid at any cost getting in contact in that area. We might even go around it just so we don't get caught in a fight over there. And sometimes we'll even get shot from the areas of these hospitals and schools. And the instruction would be to not engage in fire, to go and flank and try to find another way, just so we don't end up hitting civilians. Now, what they would do sometimes, they will come and they will call, and I've seen with my own eyes, they will come and they will call little children around them, and then one of them will just open an RPG and shoot at the soldiers, and then someone will shoot back, and then maybe a child will get killed. I know for a fact that the IDF never had the intention to kill any woman or any child or any person that is innocent civilian. And when it looks at the kill death ratio, right now the numbers are surfacing and they're actually quite interesting, because it seems to be that the death ratio in Gaza was 1-to-1, if not 1-to-2. For a reference, the death ratio when the American forces or European forces were in Iraq or in Afghanistan was, in average, I would say 1-to-10, if not even 1-to-50 sometimes. In some places was 1-to-5. None of them have even reached to be close to 1-to-1, 1-to-2. And in most condensed area in the world, Gaza, which comes and shows you, and with a terrorist organization that is doing everything it can to use its population as human shield. So you literally have a 24/7, 3 years straight, elite SWAT operation on an entire population that is holding their own people hostage and trying to minimize the casualties of their own people. And then people come and tell you, you guys are discriminately shooting, or you guys are just going and killing innocent civilians. How do you feel about that? That just shows you that most people don't really know how wars are fought. They don't really know how difficult it is. I'll give you an example. And that happened. A team is walking right now in Gaza, in the streets. All of a sudden, an ambush opens from one of the roofs and they start shooting at them with machine guns. You take cover, you start shooting back, and all of a sudden a fridge gets thrown from the rooftops and literally lands on your friend. Now you're shooting at some people that are shooting at you from some highway buildings. Your friend right now maybe broke his back, and you have your other friends right now, and an IED explodes in one of the streets, and you realize they're closing on you to create an ambush. So you break a door, you shoot covering fire to one of these windows, you drag your friend to the house. Inside the house, all of a sudden, someone jumps on you, a terrorist, you take him down, and now you're in the house, you call for evac, and now you start seeing half the neighborhood is starting to come right now, and they want to lynch and kill these. They literally made an ambush. So while you're having this battle to survival with wounded friends, and your friend just got shot in the leg, and you're dragging him and you're shooting back, you call for airstrike to come and help you. So Israel will do whatever it can to go and bring out their soldiers, like any army, like the US Army or anyone, to bring them back alive into Israel. Now, unfortunately, the population there either did not evacuate on purpose or were not allowed to evacuate because Israel have sent flyers and called them before, saying, guys, this is going to be a war zone, get out of there. So now you have civilians inside of a complete war zone with IDF solely being ambushed and everybody's shooting at everybody. So to think that there won't be any civilian casualties there, it's very, very unlikely. They're probably going to be civilian casualties right now because complete mayhem, chaos from both sides, by the way. It could be that they will accidentally shoot themselves or their friends and etc. So when you look and understand that this is how warfare looks like in Gaza, and now you take it on a bigger scale and you say, wow, that happened for 3 years and there's only 70 or 80,000 people dead, then you realize how crazy and professional was the IDF to come with these results. And people don't like to hear that because every death, kind of blind their eyes. Oh my God, how can you say that? Well, you know what, guys? There were wars that millions of people have died. War is terrible. People die in wars. The best thing is to avoid war if you can. But sometimes you can't avoid war because war comes to your doorstep or they literally kidnap your family and you have to go and bring them back. So that's about that.
Yeah. So there's three things you mentioned that are common responses to the things that I brought up, but we still have to get back to um, as a fellow Middle Eastern person, and I know that it's kind of like me living in the U.S. We are on the protected side. The U.S. will always be more powerful and more capable to defend its population than any other country. But when you're on the
Mm-hmm.
other side, let's say that your parents made different choices and you were stuck in Gaza and you don't agree with what's going on, but you're stuck there. Um, the pamphlets, the calls and stuff like that are only symbolic because you don't have too many places to go. That's the challenging thing is when people say, like you mentioned, well, they all want to kill the Israelis, just like people would say that all the Israelis want to kill the Palestinians. I know
No, I don't. I don't think they all want.
of
I don't think they all
uh,
want to kill us. I don't think so. I know Palestinians quite well. I
so
uh,
so give
I've
us
been
the
to
other
Palestine.
picture. Tell us about the Christians in Gaza.
So first of all, there's not many Christians in Gaza. Unfortunately, let's start with that. There's not many Christians in most Muslim countries in general. They've been getting extinct slowly, slowly disappearing. Now, not only Christians, but also non-Christians. There is people in Gaza that are good and kind. There is people in Gaza that don't want this war. There's people in Gaza that want just a peace and want prosperity for their children and just want to be left alone to live their life. Not everybody in Gaza is radical like Hamas, although there's quite a lot, but there is. And yes, it is extremely unfortunate because they are being stuck right now in a very, very bad place. They have their own nation kidnapped by a very radical terrorist Islamist organization that is using their country basically as a base of operation for terrorism. And then there's Israel that want to eliminate that threat because they want to protect their border, protect their people, and also bring back their hostages. And then you have these innocent people stuck there, which is one of the hardest places and the most, I would say, unfortunate situations to be. But then the question is, what can you do? Should Israel, let's say, not go and try to rescue their hostages because there might be a few innocent people in Gaza that might get hurt? Should Israel let a terrorist organization keep plotting on October 7 and wanting to go and annihilate? They wanted to genocide Israel because there might be. Should Israel hope that the Christians in Gaza will be able to share the gospel and convert all of Gaza? And then, by the way, that was one of the things that I once said when I was, talked to a friend of mine. I said the only way for peace in the Middle East if all Palestinians will become Christians. And my friends looked at me, what? And I said, no, no. And that became even almost an official thing by the IDF. One time, I remember I was an officer of a checkpoint, and one of our instructions was that we should do our best to make it easy for Christian organizations and NGOs to actually enter Gaza for humanitarian and et cetera, and also come out, Gaza and Palestine. And I came and I asked my commander, what's the reasoning behind it, like, to go extra the mile to actually make it easy? He came in and said, listen, there was never, almost never, I think, a single Christian suicide bomber that came from Palestine. They don't have it in their DNA. They don't try to go and suicide bomb and commit, terrorist attacks. And if some of these Palestinians will convert, will come to faith, then most likely he'll become peaceful, and most likely will not end up having to, one day confront him in a checkpoint or in a military operation. And also, even if he doesn't become Christian, if they will make friends with some of these European, NGOs and people that go there, then maybe that will change their mind to open for a new perspective. Because yes, you can come and say an average Palestinian who grew up in a very, very poor environment, who have only seen one kind of teaching, which is, Muslim Brotherhood indoctrination, and then also only seen IDF soldiers as his reference for Israelis, which when you see an IDF soldier and you're in Ramallah or in Gaza, it's most likely not coming to, play football with you. It's probably a military operation. They're going to take down someone or to arrest or to eliminate a terrorist. So there's probably coming with violent intentions. So yeah, obviously, it's going to be very, very hard not to get indoctrinated to hatred and to also blame everything on Israel. So we were very supportive of Christians in Palestine, but also we know that they are very, very limited. They can't really do much there, because it's a Muslim Sharia law. And in Sharia law, if people don't know it, Islam and Christianity and Judaism are considered the people of the book. So you don't have to convert them or kill them, but they live in a class B, C, or D kind of citizenship where they need to pay higher taxes. They can't ride a horse. They can't hold a sword. They cannot build a new church or a new temple or a higher building, and etc. So they are living in very kind of, I would say, oppressing reality where they cannot just go in the street and say, let's change the way that we see things. Um, yes, so it is very sad. But then again, the question that I ask is, what solution do you offer in combating um, jihadist extremists that want to eliminate you? Like, how can you avoid fighting them and not having civilians get in the way?
Well, but there's a recent report that there's extremist settlers
Sorry,
in
can you repeat that? Sorry, the line was coming broken. Extremist settlers that are what?
to anything on and it's and going a lot habit in the West Bank. You think is uh,
Yeah, you're coming broken again. If you can repeat that question, sorry, sounds like an important one, so I just couldn't hear it.
sure. Reported extremist settlers are having setting on fire and breaking the West Bank. Do you think the Israelis are enough to curtail extremists on the Jewish side, or um, putting the blind eye and not doing anything because it supports some of their political?
So, first of all, I condemn these extremist acts in any way. I condemn any extremist Israeli, doesn't matter if you're settler or not, that will go and harm Palestinians or burn their property or cut down their olive trees. That's, to me, someone like that should go to jail. Just like in any country, if you go and commit, and not only because it's Palestinian, if you go in Israel and break into someone's garden, burn his trees, doesn't matter which religion he is, or hurt him, then you should go to jail, or at least have the legal system deal with you. Now, I can tell you that officially, as an Israeli government policy, these things are condemned and these things are dealt by law. And some of these extremists actually have beef with the IDF as well. And sometimes they go and they puncture the wheels of IDF commanders or, military bases, or even kind of attack them because they complain that the IDF is protecting the Palestinians from them. So these people are rogue agents that are going, and that's not all the settlers, by the way. That's a very fringe, extreme, minor community among different groups of settlers that will go and do these things that are completely wrong in my eyes. Now, are they Israelis that support them, or are they Israelis that will rather close a blind eye? And are they Israelis that really condemn them? Yes, you have both. You have both, just like you'll have in every country, where you have people on the right and on the left, and you have more people extreme on the right, more people extreme on the left. Some people on the left in the U.S. Went and justified the killing of Charlie Kirk and started using terminology like "we will Kirk you" and all kind of stuff. Some people on the right will come and justify, going around and attacking Muslims and burning Quran and putting, bacon into throwing in their face. I don't know what. So you have these extremes that will come and support these things. But as an official government point of view, the government is actually taking legal actions against these people. The government is not allowing it, and often they end up in jail. There's literally a unit in the Shabak that their job is just like you have Fauda. I don't know if you've seen that TV series where you have this special unit in the IDF and Shabak that will dress and live like Muslims and Arabs to go and infiltrate some of their communities so they can go and stop, terrorists before they come and attack Israel. They have the same thing that they do to some of the religious groups in Israel. So you have a unit in the Shabak that will have some of their agents, going full on ultra religious and trying to enter some of these far distance kind of rooms just to see if they can spot something that is considered fanatic and illegal. Do I think that it's happening? Absolutely, it's happening. Do I think that it's terrible? Absolutely, it's terrible. Do I think that it represents most of Israelis? No, it doesn't represent most of Israelis. Do I think that Israel should do more to combat it? Yes, I do believe that Israel should be very careful if you don't combat it, because I feel like it's the same thing like what's happening in America right now with this America First kind of isolationist, very bizarre groups that are, that admire Nick Fontes and other people that are just clearly saying that they're racist and saying that they're Nazis or I don't know what. And if you ignore these things, then they will grow and they will become a bigger part of your country and they will affect democracy and they will bring your country to a very bad place. So I think that level of racism or aggression that is acting by some groups among the settlers and other Israelis should definitely be addressed by Israel in the most serious way, because if it goes out of control, we will end up dragging ourselves down to a place that we don't want to go as a society. So I hope that answered that question.
And for those not familiar, Shabak is another way to say the Shin Bet, which is the counterintelligence agency, internal security service. Um,
Yes.
I met a young Palestinian lady when I was in college, and she lived in the West Bank, and she would go into Jerusalem, I guess, to use the swimming pool. And she said that because she wore shorts, she was a Christian, the Muslims would throw hot water at her, and the Israelis were rude and sometimes wouldn't let them into the pool. Uh, as a Christian uh, living in Israel, are the is the persecution of Christians in the Jewish state overly stated by American tourists and NGOs, or is it real that there is tension and there is some type of hatred and dismissiveness towards Christians in Israel proper?
So let's start from the big to the small. First of all, Christians are not hated in Israel or are not treated badly, and there's no real, established persecution towards Christians. I'm a Christian. I grew up in a church there. I was a youth leader. I took youth groups for 9 years for trips 5 times a year, 3 to 7 days all around Israel. We went and volunteered in schools, hospital, beaches, stayed in, in different attractions. Never did we experience someone hating us just because we're Christians and coming and attacking us. Now, are there Jews that feel animosity against Christianity for several reasons? Yes, there is. And I'll explain several of these reasons that might later on make people think that there is some kind of a persecution, but there isn't. It's just different groups of Jewish people that have different backgrounds and stories. So, first of all, there is Jews in Israel that still feel that the Holocaust was the pinnacle masterpiece, call it, of Christian persecution towards the Jews. Because if people don't forget, Germany was considered a Christian nation, and the Catholic Church back there was very, very, very involved in helping the Nazis catch the Jews. So a lot of the Jews who don't know too much the Christians today, especially I would call it the American Christians, which are a bit different than, let's say, the old established kind of ancient churches, and in their head that symbolize this persecution that they suffered for many years. So they come with some kind of a I don't trust it. Last time we were living in these Christian lands, they were very, very bad to us. So some people, again, not most, but some people might have that level. Other Jews, mostly I would say the religious ones, they're very, very allergic to missionary activity. And they feel like there are quite a lot of Christians that will come with this missionary hope to convert them. Now, you need to understand that for a Jew, especially a religious Jew, they survived for 2,000 years staying Jewish. They survived 2 exiles. And how did they do that? No one ever, not a single nation survived an exile back in the days. Once you get exiled, you get tortured, you get, scattered around. That's it. That religion, that country disappears. So the Jewish people survived 2 exiles is because they cling jealously to their Jewish identity. And then they come and they feel like there's some groups of Christians coming and trying to convert them by missionary activity, by deceit, by I don't know what. So they create immediately kind of, we don't like them. Stay away from us. Now, these are, I would say, the main groups that will have some kind of an animosity towards the idea of Christians. But if you walk in the street of Israel, there's a lot of Christians. There's literally a lot of Christians in Israel. There's literally a Christian quarter in Jerusalem. There is churches all across the country. There is Christians in the army, all the way from fighter pilots. There are Christians in the Shabak, in the Mossad. There's Christians in the government. So there's not an official persecution per se. If you want to look for persecution, go to Syria. You'll see there where they're beheading Christians, bombing churches, and etc. Go to try to build a church in Jordan or something like that. Go to Lebanon and see what Hezbollah is doing. So there you will see like real persecution in general towards minorities. In Israel, you might see here and there just a stupid kid throwing a Coca-Cola can at someone because he doesn't like him. But that kid who just threw a Coca-Cola can at a Christian girl a minute ago threw a Coca-Cola can at a police officer and also at a school teacher. So that's not necessarily representing institutionalized persecution towards Christians. It's far from that. And I know it for a fact because I lived there and I was a very involved member in the Christian community in Israel. It is far from that.
Regarding the and you experienced it yourself, right?
Can you say that again? Sorry, the connection was coming weak again. I don't know if the internet is my place or yours, but okay. Can you repeat that?
I'm gonna change sections because we're having a lot of um, that you experience as a Christian living in Israel. Um, I know that the official Israeli stance on the Epstein files is that they have nothing to do with them, but there's a lot of Israelis in pro-Israel Jews that are mentioned in the emails and other documents that are coming out. Uh, how do you feel about that, and does it affect the credibility of the state of Israel, having had some connections with that guy?
So first of all, I feel like everyone that was involved in the Epstein should be investigated. I think that most people, or at least many of the people that were there, have done hideous, most horrific crimes against women, against children, very satanic stuff, and should go to jail. And I think that investigation, because it involves a lot of powerful people, they're pushing it under the rug and the carpet, and that's a disgrace. I think anyone that ever touched a child in an inappropriate way or that have committed any crime, against women or in general, should go to jail and face a severe, punishment. Now, were there Israelis there? As far as I know, there was one, Ehud Barak. That's the only Israeli that I think that was there. Maybe there was another one, I don't know what. And that is, for me, is a very, very kind of red flag. What was he doing there? Why was he connected to Jeffrey Epstein? Was it only business? Did he really know what's happening or not? I think that definitely should be investigated. Now, with that, I see how people in America are trying to paint it like Epstein is Israel and all Israelis are Epstein and we're supporting him. Here's something that people need to understand. Most Israelis never heard who's Epstein before. They couldn't care less. A guy in Tel Aviv who just want to go to the bar, have a beer, or go to the beach and surf doesn't know, don't care about Epstein. We're not involved. It's an American thing. So Epstein was a Jew, but Epstein also had emails that he said that he hates Israel, and then he had emails that he says that he's having ties with Israel, and then he had emails that he was having ties with Russia, with Saudi Arabia. If one thing, Epstein should get a Nobel Prize for diversity, and I'm saying that as a joke, because he literally managed to bring people from different extreme very very kind of far away groups all together, united by one thing, which was pedophilia and sexual satanic kind of criminal behavior. It does not represent Israel. It does not compromise the Israeli government. It's not something that is been discussed too much in Israel. Most Israelis that you tell them today, they think that Epstein was an animal, a filthy animal and a beast and a disgusting person. Most Israel that you meet today, 2 years ago, had no idea who Epstein was. But I feel like in America, there's a lot of people right now that are trying to paint it as if Israel is controlling America and Israel is trying to uh, change the politics, and Israel is all Epstein. We have so much of our own problem. Do you think that we have time to try to control a nation like America? Like seriously, Bibi is having so much issues on his plate from the enemies of Israel want to destroy it, from different parties in Israel that want to throw him off power, from legal uh, lawsuits that they have against him, from the right and the left. So to think that Israel, on top of everything, is running the Epstein scandal and is also controlling the American government is something that only in America they're falling for it. And that's because people are bored and have never been outside of America most of the time, and they really believe that this is the case. We don't like Epstein. What he did is terrible, and anyone that was in it is terrible. But I won't come and say that there was a lot of Israelis, because I think there was actually more Americans and non-Israelis there in comparison compared to Israelis. Now, I'm not making an excuse for any Israeli that was there, but to try to paint it that way, I think is a very wrong thing that is falling into the hands of people that want to jump on the anti-Semite wagon and blame Israel again for everything and believe that cabal behind the scene and that Israel is controlling the Epstein file and etc.
Why is why is the
Eh,
ex-prime minister not being arrested? Why is the chief rabbi of Israel not making a statement, just like the Pope is not making a statement? Why is the Israeli community not, uh, there was a new expose that there was an Israeli child that was raped by multiple people in one of the emails. Why isn't there outrage? Because what makes people look guilty is when they say there's nothing to see here, just like during the Gaza operation, when they say that it's not true that there's war crimes, or now with Iran saying it's not true that we manipulated Israel, the U.S. to get involved. When you just say flat out, if you talk about it, you're anti-Semite, you make people more anxious and more worried that there is something hidden. If everybody took a strong stance, like they're doing in England, where they're coming after Prince Harry, uh, then it looks like at least they're trying. But this idea that like any criticism or any
but
association that is
that's not true. But that's not true. Sorry for cutting in. That's not true, and that's something that again Americans who are not going out of America just like I don't know why they believe that. In Israel, there's a lot of criticism over Ehud Barak. A lot. Like the news in Israel is talking a lot about it. What were you doing there? He had to come several times and to try to defend himself. Said like, I just went there for business. I had no idea about that, and this is this. So people have completely lost trust, or a lot of people completely lost trust in Ehud Barak with what happened. People are demanding that there will be an investigation for it. They want to know. So in Israel, like I said, they didn't even know what Epstein was. Most of Israel, they were like literally unaware of it. And then when that came happen, people in Israel started like, what is that? What are we talking? What did Ehud Barak do there? What's that story? And they start figuring it out. So there is definitely a backlash. I won't say that there isn't. Now, some people in America might believe, I don't know why would they believe that, or why would they say that without actually checking. Now, you still need to remember that Israel right now, with all due respect to what happened with the Epstein file, Israel right now is engaged in a war that has been happening for 3 years at 8 fronts, and that war is just getting bigger and bigger in some aspects. So they do have other issues that are maybe more crucial or critical right now for the public attention to go in, rather than be fixated on why did Ehud Barak go to Epstein Island. And with all, and I don't want to make it sound like I don't think that what happened in the Epstein file, is serious. It's very serious and it's very, very disgusting, but it's more of an American thing than most of the world. We're not obsessed with it like an American. I explain why. In the Middle East, there's literally countries that are making the Epstein Island look like a Disney park. In Iran, there is more than 30, some people say 70,000 people, but let's say 40, let's stick to 40, that have been murdered in several, like 3-4 days. They are raping women who are virgins, so most of them are teenagers, in prisons before they execute them, because that was literally a fatwa that was made by the ayatollahs. So there is Epstein Island that is happening on steroids in the Middle East all the time, mostly under Muslim countries. And then they want us to completely leave all of that and focus right now on Epstein Island in America. And we did. We heard the news, we saw about it, we did a few questions to Barack, but then we're still right now involved in so many other things that it will be a little bit irrational to think that Israel should be all fixated right now. Stop everything and fixated on that. Now, I don't want that to sound like I'm making an excuse for that, because again, if Ehud Barak was involved in any action that have sexual activity with minors, he should go to jail. Anyone on the, and that's most Israelis will tell you that, anyone on the Epstein list who have proven criminal ties to what happened should go to jail. If anyone should criticize anyone, that should be internal American criticizing their own government right now. Why aren't they more investigations happening? That's I think is a valid question, because we saw what happened there. But again, that's an American thing. That's not an Israeli thing. There was a few Israelis that went there, as far as I know, one, but maybe there was another one. I don't know. But it's not looked in favor in Israel. People in Israel don't like Jeffrey Epstein. People in Israel don't see Jeffrey Epstein as a representation of Israel. It's something that is only in America they're fixated on it and trying to blame. And I do believe in the bigger picture, it comes from different other reasons, but we see it, we're not looking at it the same way.
But we also need to be honest that human trafficking happens in Israel from with the Russians, and that needs to be dealt with as well. So let's talk about the war. So if Israel has overextended fighting in Gaza and now in Lebanon, why would they go and pick a fight with Iran? Is Israel like almost like suicidal? Like even though they have the support of the US, that's a lot for a small country to take on, to go against two terroristic groups. Then they have issues with the Houthis, and now they're going to go against the what they call us the big Satan. They're the big Satan in a sense by supporting all these extremist groups. Why would Israel go out of their way, other than fear of retaliation or some type of greater terrorist attack, as compared to what most of us think that it just like Trump, Bibi is trying to stay in power for as long as possible, and it's very common for a president to say, "I have to finish the job, so I'm gonna go pick fights with everybody. I'm gonna start as many wars as possible, so then I keep being seen as the hero who's protecting the people."
So I've heard that theory that people, would tend to believe that some of these wars are done because politicians don't want to go to jail or deal with other stuff, so they will. And that I can understand where that's coming from. Also, I can understand why people would see that, with Trump with the Epstein's list, with Bibi with other stuff. But I think you said something before: is Israel suicidal? And I would say it's the complete opposite. Israel is right now in a war in Iran because Iran has been saying that they want to build a nuclear bomb and nuke Israel. And they've said that before and before. And not only the Mossad, but also the CIA and also European agencies have all said that Iran have been lying in terms of the enrichment of uraniums and of trying to build nuclear weapons. And they have shown that they can be trusted. So after the 12-day war, Iran have came to the place, thanks to the Israeli Air Force and the Mossad, that they were the most vulnerable and they were ever before. And that have opened an opportunity right now to completely go and finish the job now or wait 5 years from now when they will have a nuclear weapon, and then we'll be in a very different story. Now, with that still comes reports. Now, I am not in these circles anymore of this top classified information. And even when I was in the army, I will probably not be, exposed to some of these very closed rooms. How close is Iran to get a nuclear weapon? Are they really 2 weeks from it? Are they 2 months from it? Is it one bomb? Is it six bombs? But it's still, I think that's irrelevant, because just the chance that a regime like that have stated that they want to have a nuclear weapon, that is working towards that, that have shown us that they're willing to massacre all their people, that have shown us right now how they're shooting missiles at everybody. They even shot at Lebanon. Lebanon was literally their country. They just shot missiles in Lebanon, that they're willing to shoot, that they lied about the ballistics and everything. They lied about everything. So Israel going to war with Iran and America going to war with Iran right now, in terms of a strategic, logical perspective, it's the most logical thing. Why wait until they're stronger and have a nuclear weapon if you can take them now when they don't have the nuclear weapon and they're not strong enough at their weakest point? And also add to that, they're an ally of one of your biggest adversaries. So Russia right now is busy with Ukraine. So that's a great time because they won't be able to get involved with Iran. So there's so many other factors that are pointing that it's the right time to do it. Now, that was just a nuclear plan. Now let's talk about the head of the snake, the head of terrorism. Not only Israel, and that's again where Americans, I feel, are taking American politics and throwing it on the world, thinking that we think like you guys in terms of right, left, Republican. No. Ask most Arab countries in the Middle East, they tell you Iran should be taken down. They're actually saying, thank you, Israel, for doing the job for us, because even Arab countries in the Middle East have seen Iran as a threat stability to the area. And everybody's saying that the Middle East will be drastically safer once the head of the snake, the big Satan, as you called it, will be either toppled or extremely crippled. So in so many ways, this is, in my eyes, is the right thing to do. Now, I know people don't like to hear that because people like that notion of feeling that war is terrible and all wars are terrible. But let me ask you a question. Was the war against the Nazis, was that a terrible thing? Was that a bad war? Or was the war for the independence? Was that a bad war? Sometimes war, unfortunately, becomes the solution.
But it's a false equivalency because the Nazis were expanding. Are you saying that the Iranians were expanding and taking over the Middle East?
Absolutely.
How?
Look at Lebanon. They literally took all of Lebanon. Hezbollah is an Iranian proxy. The Lebanese right now, they just raised their head and they kicked the Iranian ambassador from there. Hezbollah is a Lebanese proxy, took over Lebanon. They were starting to take over Syria. Why do you think Syrians hate Iran so much? Where, Muslims hating Muslims like so much. They even Syrians right now, which are Al Qaeda and ISIS, came to Israel and said, Israel, let us help you fight Hezbollah, because they were felt as victims of Iran. Saudi Arabia is terrified from Iran. All the Arab countries that are really feeling that Iran even say it. You see, you need to understand that the Shia and the Sunni have a very deep-rooted hatred between the two, where they want to lead the Muslim world. Now, Iran have clearly stated that they want to do that. So the only difference I would say between the Ayatollah regime to the Nazi regime is that the Nazis were less religious fanatics and also more efficient. But in terms of grandiose evilness and wickedness, they're very similar. They execute people that are not at the end. They kill gay people. They want to kill the Jews. They want to annihilate. They want to enslave. They want to force themselves in their ideology on others. The only difference was that Nazi Germany was much more successful, so they managed to expand longer, and Iran is not as successful. But Israel is going and attacking, and America going and attacking right now Iran, who, again, that's without the nuclear thing, which was just, that's the nuclear thing is just enough for any sane country to come and say, we don't want them to have a nuclear weapon. But any other thing, their involvement in terrorism and their mass execution of innocent people and their, genocidal ideology, I think that brings quite a lot of weight. Why should I'm actually surprised that there's no more countries in the West that are joining right now this war to go and topple them.
The countries from the West don't want to get involved. The countries of the Middle East, according to you, are thankful, but they are not involved. So are they just all sitting back and letting Israel and the U.S. get destroyed? Are they being cowards? Are they doing what we know in our fight against anti-Semitism, where they want to blame Israel for all the problems? So they don't want to get involved. If it goes wrong, it's going to be Israel's fault. If it goes well, then they can pat Israel on the back. Do you think that the Middle Eastern countries are taking advantage of Israel's resolve?
You brought a very good point here, and you touched a few things. I think in general, a lot of countries from the level of governments, not from the level of the people right now, from the level of governments, are very thankful for Israel because Israel is doing the dirty job for them. A lot of these countries, they're happy because Israel is fighting their enemy. Israel has been very, very efficient in taking down their enemies. So, in that aspect, they are. And the same thing right now goes to America. I feel like Europe and many other countries in the region are just letting Israel and America do the job that is definitely in their interest. They don't want to get involved because they don't want to. There's a few reasons. One, they don't want to get uh, between the legs of the IDF and the U.S. Air Force right now, and they're not just trained; they're just going to embarrass themselves. I think in many aspects, which is a shame because they should be able to defend themselves. Second is there's quite a lot of Muslim radicals that already migrated into Europe. Not all, but it's quite a lot. And it's placing a lot of European countries in a very compromised position that if they will join right now, they will have a lot of terrorist activity happening in their country. So they're thinking like, now, how can we join that or not? And in other ways, I think you're very right. It's very convenient to let Israel do the dirty work. And then later on, if things don't work, just blame it on Israel, blame it on America. And if you look at two countries in the world that are often being blamed by default, is Israel and America. A lot of, even in Europe or in a lot of the Arab countries that I walked around, they love to blame America or Israel for all the problems in the world, and usually without really a good explanation. I'm not saying that Israel or America or any country have not done stupid things around the world. I think many countries have done a lot of stupid, crazy stuff around the world, but it doesn't stop only with Israel and America. I think every country almost, and some countries even way more. So I think to your question is it's a mix of all. They want to blame Israel for all of it, but they're also very thankful for what Israel and America are doing. And they also want to stay out of it because they don't want the retaliation to come their way. So if Israel and America don't succeed now, for example, they can keep their hands clean and say, yeah, we were not involved, which I think is a bit cowardish because even Donald Trump right now is coming and saying that America should look again into this alliance with NATO because Iran is definitely a threat to Europe as well, but they don't want to get involved at all. And not to talk also, if you remember the history lessons when we look at the Nazi Germany and what happened to the Jews when they were being rounded in concentration camps and being executed, a lot of the Western nations knew about it. And no one kind of did anything. They were just kind of closing their eyes. They only started doing when Germany attacked them. And then same thing in some ways, in a different way, but it's a little bit similar, is happening right now to the Iranian people. They're being massacred and executed because they're trying to oppose a religious um, oppression that is happening on them, forcing Islam on them and the rules and the Sharia laws. And they're being killed in the tens of thousands. And again, the world is just sitting quiet, and the only ones who are doing something about it are Israel and America. And I think that is worth to be noted, and it's kind of ignored around the world because, if anything, I think that is a very just thing that America and Israel are standing. Now, they're not doing it only because of pure intentions. Yes, they have their own agendas, but I do believe that they do care about the Persian people and they will wish to see them free.
Last question. So you mentioned that there is Israelis, and I'm sure that there are Middle Eastern Israelis who dress up as Arabs or Muslims and they infiltrate different groups. Can you tell us, is it possible that some operatives got inside of Iran and they're the ones that stirred up the riots and the protests to create unrest within the country?
So, to that question, actually, I had on my podcast a dear friend who was 30 years in the Mossad, and he just retired recently. And he was an expert about Iran. That was literally his bread and butter. And what he came and he told me that obviously Israel and Iran and the Mossad and the special forces had a lot to do inside of Iran. That's an enemy country that want to destroy you. So obviously you're going to have a lot of your intelligence and forces kind of trying to go and see how can you counter it. But he said this particular uprising is the first one that they saw that came fully from the people and from a direction that no one really anticipated. It came actually from the bazaars. They call it the uprising of the people of the bazaar. It came not because the Mossad wanted it or the CIA wanted it or other ideologies. They came because the Iranian currency have got so low, the Iranian people have got so poor. And meanwhile, they're seeing that Iranian proxies like Hezbollah and others are getting paid, thousands of dollars. And meanwhile, in Iran, they barely have any money. So the people in the bazaar and the truck drivers, they got so fed up that they took it to the streets. And when they took it to the streets, there were a lot of, anyway, bottled anger towards that regime, from women who were executed all the way to children, families who just saw their family members being murdered, or people just wanted who remember the secular life that they had, and they joined. Now, once that started, if you ask me, if all these intelligent agencies like the Mossad, CIA, and others did not jump on that opportunity and either helped or pushed or promoted, absolutely, because it's in their interest. So it's the same thing like if there was an enemy of America and you'll see an uprising happening in America right now, they want to come and support it because they're enemies of America and America is their enemies. So when it comes with Iran, I do believe that this one particularly was not instigated by Israel or the Mossad, but rather came naturally by a gradually corruption and falling of the Iranian regime to that point that their people got so fed up that they raised their head. But then it continued thanks to the promise of Donald Trump, I believe, and also the work of the Mossad. But mostly, I would say, when Donald Trump came and told the Iranians that help is on the way, which in some ways it maybe was a bit premature, but from my talks to many of the Iranians, that really gave them that push in their backs to think that if there was ever a chance, now is our chance. And then they ran even more to the streets. And unfortunately, also many of them got killed and massacred in that aspect. But I feel like it's like a ping pong thing. Like, it's like a snake chasing his own tail. Like, who came first, the egg or the chicken? Because what happened is when they did that, then Donald Trump had more pressure to actually go and back what he said, and then it just created that ball where this came. But that's regarding the Iranian people. I do think that the war in Iran is not only to save the Iranian people, but is more to stop them from having a nuclear bomb. And on the way, if they could save the Iranian people on top of the regime, then everybody will be happy.
Uh, Thank you for your time. Can you please tell us about your podcast and how people can get a hold of your content?
Absolutely. And thank you for having me. My podcast is called Mansur Ashkar in YouTube. It's Mansur Ashkar, Ashkar. And I post my videos there. And also, I'm active on Instagram where it's Mansur with an O, Mansorashkar. And I try to do daily videos there, in mostly in English, sometimes in Arabic and in Hebrew, and also help translate a lot of what's happening in the Middle East for people who want to kind of understand it a little bit more, for at least from the perspective of a Druze and an Israeli Arab that grew up in that region. Obviously, there's other perspectives out there also, so I recommend for people to watch all perspective.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We are always interested in hearing unique voices, and we've had a lot of conservative people on our show lately. But our job is to build bridges of understanding, and even if we don't agree or we see things differently, at least we give people a chance to flush things out versus what they see on the media, where it's just short clips, and people are often misunderstood and exploited to create more hatred and more division. So hopefully we can fight against that and connect people with sources of truth. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.